Did you know that hell doesn't need to destroy you? It only needs to distract you. The enemy of your soul doesn't need to convince you to deny God. He only needs to keep you too busy to think about him. Many believe that spiritual downfall happens suddenly, but C.S. Lewis teaches us that drifting away from God happens subtly, through small distractions, compromises, and postponements. In the Screwtape Letters, Lewis gives us an eerily realistic glimpse into the enemy's strategy. An experienced demon advises his apprentice on how to lead a human away from God's presence. He reveals that the best road to hell is not through blatant sin, but through a lukewarm life with no eternal purpose. The key is to keep a person busy, distracted, and satisfied with superficial things. And maybe this is already happening to you without realizing it. How many times have you felt the urge to pray, to seek God, to reflect on what truly matters, and told yourself, "I'll do it later"? How many opportunities for spiritual growth have been postponed because something more urgent came up? But what if I told you that these small choices aren't as harmless as they seem? Today, we will uncover how the enemy works to pull you away from God's presence, and how to escape this trap before it's too late. So if you want to strengthen your faith, grow spiritually, and understand how to live a life truly focused on God's purpose, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you don't miss content like this. Let's walk this journey together. Many people believe that drifting away from God happens all at once, as if someone simply wakes up one day and decides to reject their faith. But C.S. Lewis warns us that reality is quite different. Separation from God happens gradually. It's not through a major act of rebellion, but through a series of small compromises, little distractions that seem harmless in the moment, but, when combined, create an invisible barrier between us and the Father. In the Screwtape Letters, there is a passage that perfectly illustrates this danger. The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. This means that drifting away is rarely abrupt. You don't notice when you're slipping. Just a thought saying, "I'll pray later," one day, without reading the Word, an excuse to skip church, until suddenly your heart has grown cold. And the enemy knows this. He doesn't need you to explicitly reject God. He only needs to keep you entertained, to offer just enough distractions so that your pursuit of God becomes less frequent, until, without realizing it, you no longer feel his absence. Think about how this happens in daily life. Have you ever felt the urge to seek God but postponed it because you were too tired? Have you noticed how hours can fly by on social media, but a few minutes of prayer feel like a struggle? Have you looked back and realized that without noticing, your time with God has gradually diminished? This isn't a coincidence, it's strategy. The devil wants you to live your life distracted, busy, and spiritually numb. But God calls us to something greater. He calls us to an abundant life where each choice draws us closer to Him. Now take a deep breath and let's dive deeper into this idea with more insights from C.S. Lewis, understanding how the enemy uses this strategy to pull us away from our eternal purpose. If the enemy of your soul had a plan to pull you away from God, how would he do it? Many believe that Satan works only through major tragedies, overwhelming temptations, or scandalous sins. But C.S. Lewis teaches us that the real danger is not in direct attacks, but in the subtlety of distraction. In the Screwtape Letters, the senior demon advises his apprentice not to force a person to deny God. That could cause a shock and awaken their conscience. Instead, he suggests a much more effective strategy: keeping Christians busy with irrelevant things. The best way to lead a man away from God is not to make him hate the truth, but to make him indifferent to it. Fill his mind with worldly concerns. Keep him always busy, but never with time to think about eternity. The enemy's goal is not just to make you sin. He wants you to live on autopilot. He wants your life to be a sequence of occupations with no eternal meaning. And how does this happen in real life? The illusion of normalcy. You live your routine without realizing you're drifting away from God. Postponing what truly matters. You always intend to seek God more, but you never find the time. Spiritual exhaustion. You feel overwhelmed by life and believe that God can wait. The devil in the book calls this the gentle slope. There are no terrifying cliffs, just a comfortable path where each step seems harmless. A person doesn't realize they are drifting away until it's too late. And the truth is, this strategy works. How many Christians are too busy to pray? How many, without realizing it, treat their faith as something secondary? But God has not called us to an empty, meaningless life. He calls us to live with purpose, to walk in truth, and to recognize the enemy's schemes. Now, take a deep breath, and let's dive deeper into this idea with more insights from C.S. Lewis, understanding how this strategy operates in today's world and what we can do to fight it. C.S. Lewis had a unique ability to transform deep spiritual concepts into stories that help us see reality more clearly. The Screwtape Letters is not just a book about temptation. It's a true manual that reveals how the enemy works silently to pull us away from God. What makes this book so impactful is the strategy it presents. The devil doesn't want you to hate God. He would rather you forget him. He doesn't want you to reject the truth with anger, but to treat it as something irrelevant, unimportant. Keep him distracted, busy, and satisfied with superficialities. If he starts thinking about what truly matters, fill his mind with 1,000 worthless things. This is the tactic we see every day. A world that offers us endless distractions, content that captures our attention, constant worries about the immediate, while eternity always seems like a distant concern. Lewis teaches us that the greatest danger is not hostility toward God, but indifference, a lukewarm faith, a life without reflection, a routine without spiritual pursuit. And maybe you've felt this before. Has your spiritual life ever taken a backseat because something more urgent came up? Have you ever felt an emptiness, a restlessness, but instead of seeking God, you chose to distract yourself with something else? The enemy knows that as long as we are immersed in trivial things, we won't have time to reflect on our souls, and the longer we delay this awakening, the further we drift from God's purpose. Lewis warns us that while we remain distracted, time is passing, and every day without God is a day closer to destruction. That's why it's time to look inward, identify these strategies in your own life, and start making different choices. Let's move forward and understand how we can break free from this cycle and reconnect with what truly matters: God and eternity. Now that we understand how the enemy operates, the big question arises: how can we escape this trap and return to God? If hell's plan is to keep us distracted and spiritually numb, the only way to defeat it is to choose to live intentionally for God. C.S. Lewis teaches us that there is no neutrality in spiritual life. We are either moving toward our Creator or drifting away from Him. Each moment carries an eternal choice. We are either moving toward God or away from Him. So it's not enough just to recognize the enemy's strategy. We need to act. Here are 3 essential ways to break free from this cycle and reconnect with the purpose for which we were created. Turn your heart to God intentionally. The first thing the devil wants to steal from you is your time with God. He knows that a Christian who prays, meditates on the Word, and seeks intimacy with the Father becomes unshakable. Set a daily time for prayer and Bible study. Make it a non-negotiable commitment. Before making any decision, ask yourself, does this bring me closer to or farther from God? Distance yourself from influences that weaken your faith and seek fellowship with those who spiritually build you up. Eliminate distractions that pull you away from what truly matters. There is nothing wrong with using technology or having fun, but the danger lies in letting these things dominate your life. The enemy wants to keep you distracted so that your faith becomes weak and ineffective. Limit time on social media and shallow entertainment. Practice silence and learn to hear God's voice amid the world's noise. Remember, the time you invest in what is temporary cannot be recovered, but time spent with God produces eternal fruit. Choose to live for God's kingdom today, not someday. The greatest trick of the enemy is making you believe that you can seek God tomorrow. But the truth is that the only guaranteed opportunity is now. Don't wait to feel like praying, seeking God, or changing your habits. Obedience comes before feeling. Remember that you were called for something much greater than a life of distraction and complacency. You were created for eternity. Every day, consciously choose to follow Christ, grow spiritually, and reject whatever pulls you away from Him. The enemy's trap is subtle, but now you know his strategy. You know how to escape, and that decision is in your hands. Let today be the day you choose to live for God with all your heart. Let's conclude this journey with one last reflection that could forever change your perspective. Hell doesn't need to destroy you. It only needs to keep you distracted. And now that you know this, there's only one question. What will you do with this knowledge? The truth is that every day away from God is a step in the wrong direction. Every small choice, every seemingly harmless compromise may be pulling you away from the purpose for which you were created. But the good news is that God is always ready to receive us back. The devil rejoices when he sees a man wasting his life, convinced that he still has plenty of time. But God calls those who hear His voice today. Don't believe the lie that you have plenty of time to seek God later. Life is made of the present moment, and the only right response to God's call is, "Yes, Lord, Here I am. If this content touched your heart, don't ignore this moment. Ask yourself, what has been pulling you away from God? What can change today? Write in the comments, what distraction has been stealing most of your time with God? Let's overcome this trap together and seek a deeper relationship with the Father. And if this video blessed you, share it with someone who also needs this message. I'll see you in the next content. And remember, you were not created to live distracted. You were created to live for God.